Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Youth. Joining us this afternoon, we have Dr. Cleghorn. And I just want to remind you, before we go into the meat of the matter, I just want to remind you that here at Talk of Youth, we air every second and fourth Tuesday of each month. Here at this program, what we do is basically talk about various topics that interest the youth, topics that are typically not so often talked about in the church, or some that are sometimes people tend to shy away from. So this evening, we will be talking about mentorship. So as I mentioned before, we have Dr. Cleghorn. And Dr. Cleghorn is a pastor, he's an evangelist, a lecturer, and the vice president of student services at a very prominent university here in Jamaica. He is fully immersed in youth development, and I believe that he is one of the most fitting persons to have this conversation with this event. Welcome, Dr. Cleghorn.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, Dr. Cleghorn, mentorship. So when we think about mentorship, I know for one that it is a topic that for some it's not widely talked about in some congregation. For some it is heavily there, but we're going to focus on some of the things that youth might not fully know about mentorship and what it really entails. So first I want to ask you this question. What is mentorship really?
Okay, that is a loaded question, and I'm going to break it down. Firstly, what I would like to tell you is that mentorship has its roots in the story of Homer's Odyssey of Odysseus. You can begin to think of Greek mythology. And what happened is that the king of Ithaca had to fight in the Trojan War. And he left the care of his household to mentor, teacher, and overseer of Odysseus' son, Telemachus. Now, after the war, Odysseus was condemned to wander vainly for 10 years in his attempt to return home. In time, Telemachus, his son now grown, went to search for his father. He was accompanied on his quest by Athena, goddess of war and patroness of the arts and industry, who assumed the form of mentor who would be his teacher. Eventually, the father and the son were united, and together they cast down the usurpers of Odysseus' throne and Telemachus his birthright. In time, the word mentor, and I'm giving you now the etymology and the historicity of the term mentor. Mentor, M-E-N-T-O-R, became synonymous with trusted advisor, friend, teacher, and wise person. So mentors, therefore, are those special people in our lives who through their deeds and work, I say through their proclamation what they say and demonstration what they do, help us to move toward fulfilling that potential in that mentee, that one whom you are mentoring, so that that vision they have, that dream they have, that destiny that they have will be fulfilled and realized. That, in short, is what mentorship is all about.
You mentioned something just now. You mentioned that mentor, one who demonstrates as we'd have called it in Jamaica, have fruit on the tree, because one cannot be a law without having the fruit on the tree and about that particular thing that they're trying to bring across to that mentee. So I was going to ask you if everybody can become a mentor, or is it just limited to
It,
some people?
no, it is possible, but you have to train people. People have to be trained. You cannot just get up all of a sudden and jump into a mentorship program. That's
Mm,
why it's important that those who we are trying to use as mentor are people that we handpick in that not everybody can be a mentor. And if we have to train people and watch how they handle others to determine their fitness for the assignment.
mm,
People have to learn how to deal with human nature. Everybody is different. Everybody's a different personality. There are some people who are one tracked in their mind. It is my way or you hit the highway. You cannot be a mentor if you are like that. You have to be open. You have to accommodating, and you have to be able to deal with people who are difficult, but you don't let them set the agenda. You set an agenda to love them and care for them, and ultimately they will fall into that groove. So you have to be trained to be a mentor. Yes.
so first of all, self-proclaimed mentorship role in terms of, for example, you made mention of the fact that it's better for a person to be trained in order for them to be effective mentors. Because now, especially in COVID, we are seeing a lot of self-emerging mentors. And I know many of us consider ourselves mentors because of some value that we have that we can add to people. Or areas in our lives that we were successful, so we want to disseminate or to share that wealth with other persons. So, what would you say are for persons who are in that category of self-proclaiming mentors? Um, and I touched on it a while ago. What would you say to such a person further to the training? And as I mentioned before, that I'm good at a particular thing, and I believe that I have a wealth of to share all of the training. Do you think that person can still be effective in you know even though the training?
Um, well, there are some people with some natural gifts. Some people who can relate to anybody. They
Hmm.
have that gift to relate to people of sometimes very complex natures and complex personalities. So some people have the gift, and you will see it manifest immediately. You'll see how they interact with other people, how it's smooth, how when they come upon a difficult situation, how they're able to go around it with a smile, with a joke, with some laughter, and everybody moves on. So there are some people who have the gift. I mean, definitely have the gift, and you see it. Others, you have to train them because they are not instant. And we have to spend the time to train mentors to be able to do the job and do it well. Remember now, what a mentor, I mean, mentoring is a process. Listen carefully now as I answer you in more depth. Mentoring is the process by which an older leader or person invests, and that word is very powerful, invests his or her life into a younger, emerging leader for the purpose of spiritual character and leadership development in an intensely relational fashion. So the mentor has got to be able to able to develop a relationship with another and maintain and sustain that relationship so that the mentoring process can be complete in the life of the mentee.
Okay, so is what I'm getting from you is that for a person is already well established in mentor as a mentor, they don't necessarily look for persons who have the skills and potential skills the skills already to be mentors, but the potential, because you made mention at the fact that an older person, for example, who has a wealth of knowledge and want to share it with a younger person who will eventually either take on the role that when the person retires or when the person dies or when the person becomes redundant, because of the person who the understudy would have garnered the information and would have become well seasoned to take on the role, would have been there. So am I right to say that the person does not necessarily, the person who is being mentored, it does not necessarily have to show ready signs that they'll be a good mentor, then a good mentor, but based on having the information and having that relationship with their mentors, that eventually they will be able to take on that position.
That is highly possible. But remember now, we are dealing with um, three or four, well, most of three very important concepts in the mentoring environment. Remember that you are mentoring someone morally,
Mm.
for value recognition, and for attitudes. Morals, values, and attitudes become an effective ingredient or become effective ingredients in the process of mentoring. So you want a young person or a younger person to be able to grab the values, the morals, and the attitudes that determine a well oiled home, school, church, religious environment, and the community at large. Because these levels do have principles and standards that they maintain. So you want to ensure that your mentee, the person you are mentoring, understands and accepts these morals, these values, and these attitudes in order to become effective. When someone understands these very precious items in the mentoring environment, then mentorship becomes easier to do because you would reflect the norms consistent with the home, the school, your religious beliefs, and society at
Okay, makes sense now. All right, the next question that I would like to ask is, why is mentorship important, really? Because for me, I didn't grow up in the church.
large. Yes.
I didn't grow up in the church, and I when I came into Christendom, and I've been to churches outside of Seventh Day Adventism, and the church would have tried so many times as youth. They say that we're young, and there was always this bridge between the older persons and the younger person. That is something that we hear ever so often, that there's a generation gap between
Mhm.
those two. And sometimes some programs would probably try to link an older person with a younger person to build that rapport and see to allow them to develop in those moral standards and the other standards you made mention of. But sometimes it starts, but it drifts apart. So what can you say to us, for persons who's anti being a mentee to a person? Why is it so important for us as young people to appreciate the art of mentorship?
All right, I'm going to answer it in two parts. I'm going to give you what I call a universal equation, and then I'm going to speak to two other things: self-esteem and self-discovery. Here is a universal equation: rules minus relationship equals rebellion. Let me do that again. Rules minus relationship equals rebellion. There are a number of persons who are trying to be mentors but
Mm,
have not developed a relationship. You cannot be an effective mentor until you would have developed what I call a trusting relationship with a younger person. The person has to trust you before they're going to open up, before they will allow you to tell them anything, before they will allow you to direct them. And the first thing that must happen is to develop a relationship. And how you develop it? You develop a relationship without boundaries, without any do's and don'ts. So somebody somebody is in the church, and the person is a little truant, that we would say truant, uh, not following rules and so on, and is just always rebellious. How do you get to that person? You have to
mm,
come into the person's world. And that's why we say mentorship has a level of vulnerability in it, because you don't know what is going to happen when you do so. But you do so prayerfully, leaning upon the Lord to give you wisdom. I have had to deal with some very tough persons. We call them roughnecks in the realm of mentorship. Roughnecks. I got to spend time sitting down, let them tell me everything. I don't want to say anything. I just listen, and I said, how is that? I clarify. When they say, I've smoked marijuana a few times, and it was good. And what do you think about smoking marijuana? And I said, well, let's look at marijuana. What is marijuana? And you begin to discover it. You begin to discuss it and open it up. Then you begin to tell me the negative pieces of marijuana. You can tell them the positive pieces of it as well, but not through smoking, through
mm,
research. And when they find they hemp oil and other ingredients, some can help uh, diabetes. It cures glaucoma and so on. So you let them know that there are good things about marijuana, but the bad things are: one, if you smoke it, what happens, and so on and so on and so on. So you let young people talk to you. Don't judge them. Don't begin to preach a sermon to them. Let them open up to you, and when they feel that you are not about judging them and proscribing them to the devil and to terrible things, they will open up bit, and you have to be patient, moderator. You have to be patient with these people, because if you're trying to make it happen overnight, you are going to run into some level of disappointment. So mentoring means that you're going to be patient. And so if you give them rules minus building a relationship with them, it is going to be equal to rebellion. The second part of my answer was going to be self-esteem. This is the beauty of mentorship. People develop a high self-esteem when they know that somebody else cares. It's not their father, not their mother, not their aunt, no relative, but somebody cares so much, has to be in their space to listen, be non-judgmental. Their self-esteem rises. A number of people who are in gangs and in doing disastrous things, and have a lifestyle that is negative. When you check them out, they have a low self-esteem, and so they are just trying to act it out. When we build self-esteem, self confidence in our young people and in our mentees. They begin to glow, they begin to blossom like our rose would be unfurling in an inflorescence. That's how it is. And then by coming to self esteem, they come to what I call self discovery. When people discover themselves, well, I'm not that bad as people say I am. I can do this well. I can speak well. I can walk. I can talk well. I can. My mentor is assisting me to discover myself. So when self-esteem and self-discovery are achieved, you have something really going for the young person and for the men.
Thank you so much. And one of the things that jumped out to me is when you said that young people want not just rules and regulation. While those things are very important, no, we should not, they're very important. But when you're trying to mentor a young person who probably is seen as, strayed and so forth, the first thing you want to is not the first thing you want to say to them is to offer an ear, is not to condemn and to put up a bunch of rules and boundaries. You do it in a way that uncompromising, but you build first relationship. And I just have to put this in there, just like your relationship with Jesus. If you want to be able to be comfortable with him, you first have to develop that relationship with him where you talk to
Oh,
him.
hmm?
And if you're going to bring up a person, if you want to go witness, the first thing you try to do is try to have a conversation with the person to try. And then after you have that conversation, seeing the needs of the person and meeting them where they are, then you slowly, bit by bit, introducing them to Jesus. So it's very important that when persons who are mentors and established, and sometimes some of us go about doing it wrong, in terms of how we seek to guide another young person. Because I've had those experiences. Older persons who was in the church who are well experienced and they're seen as mentors, but not everybody, their approach is the best in terms of how they go about addressing matters that are obvious in especially in the youth's life. So it is very important that you relationship, and we can overemphasize that relationship because
And
it's very
it's
important.
it's not just and I put an adjective to it,
Mhm.
Mrs. Moderator Thompson, trusting, trusting relationship. I add that adjective because that's what it has to be. So there are some relationships that are not trusting, and so they peter out, they end, they burn out because
Yeah.
the other person doesn't trust you. But
Yeah.
you must develop a trusting relationship. And let me just insert this text because there's a whole lot in the Bible about mentoring. Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. And I want to insert the word mentee. Train up a mentee in the way he or she should go. And when he or she is old or older, he or she will not depart from it.
Very, very potent. In moving on to another very important questions question. We all have different experiences with persons who would have been mentors to us. Those who followed that rule of being trusting, building that trusting relationship with the person who they seek to enlighten. I remember I said I didn't grow up in the church, but when I started out in Christendom, I started out in a Sunday church, and I can tell you that there was this one person who even though she didn't establish herself as a mentor, but that is what she was to me. That person would genuinely care about the young people. She didn't just want to talk to you because she wanted to fasten your business, but she genuinely cared about what was going on in the young people's life. So we'd have on Sunday afternoons youth link up where we come and talk undiluted about problems that would have been affecting us as individuals, and go out for ice cream, have youth fellowship. So those are some of the things that she used to build that rapport. So when it comes on to the to addressing certain things in our lives, we didn't get offended. Why? Because she would have learned how to build a a trusting relationship with us as youth. So when something is happening in our lives, we were not afraid to go to her and say, you know, Auntie, I'm going through this, or I'm struggling with this. Can you advise me? Can you pray with me? So those are some of the things that I personally, and because of that foundation, because of how that person would have impacted my life individually, I was able to be more open and transparent when it comes down to things that she probably would have have experienced in her life and should have overcome. So when it comes down to even helping me overcoming these challenges, I was able, because I was already comfortable talking to her, and because she had fruit on the tree, it would have been more effective. So Dr. Clegger, I want to ask you, in short, to tell us of how mentorship would have affected or impacted you on a personal level.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to share with you maybe one story, and then I'll tell you another story. My late parents, Thomas and Otis Cleghorn,
Mm,
left some indelible impressions, morals, values, and attitudes that have become indelibly etched upon my mind. I'm going
mm,
to tell you one of the first things I learned from my father. And I think my father was my greatest mentor. One morning in worship, he usually gets the family up at 4 o'clock. We couldn't understand why at 4 o'clock, when the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, is so good, and you are really down there deeply enjoying your rest, you would hear a bell ringing and my father's voice singing a song. And what he said to us, if you are going to meet the Lord, meet him before the world awakes,
mm,
or they will disturb your meeting with the Lord if you do not do it early. And then I wondered, where did my father get this from? And later on, I realized he was quoting a text in the Gospels. And Jesus, a great while before dawn, went out to pray, and he prayed for the rest of the night into the morning. So, my father was speaking, but he had biblical support. And so I learned that. And so for many years now, I have been having a regular early morning family worship hour between 4 and 6 every day, every day. That was left upon the canvas of my experience. In addition, my father was a fisherman, and he wanted me to know how he did what he did to provide for the needs of the family.
mm,
And I will never forget the first day of going out to sea with him after we had pushed the boat into the water. He said, Son, here is your first lesson about the sea. And he says, watch me carefully. He put his right hand down into the water and came up with a clenched fist. And he said this to me, Son, do you see any water? I said, no, Dad. Here comes the immortal lesson. It says, whatever your hand cannot hold, take no chances with it. I have never forgotten that. Even when I go to the beach, and I can swim, I only swim to a place where
mm,
when my feet hit the ground, my head is above the water. Those are two precious
mm,
pieces of values that my father left with me. And so, yes, Those are personal. My father used to teach me subjects in the Bible. My father was a prophecy. He would love prophecy, Daniel, and he would spend hours with me telling me about the 2300 days, what it means, telling me about what the various apocalyptic signs meant. And so by the time I got to college, I mean, I pretty much knew a whole lot more than my regular classmates who were coming into it for maybe for the first time or hadn't been in it as long as I was in it. So here is what a mentor does. A mentor sets the platform for you to stand upon and be strong as you move forward into the future.
Very, very powerful. You made mention that, well, that kind of overlap with the next question I was going to ask about the benefits. It sets the platform for you as the person who is the recipient of the knowledge, that person is bringing across to you, so that when you, because you made mention that when you came to university, because of the knowledge that you would have gotten from your father and other persons who probably would have impacted you as well, you were able to apply it to your life so that you could be even more outstanding in what you do. So we know for a fact that being mentored comes with a lot of benefits. And when I think back, as I made mention of my own experiences, the benefit that I got from mentorship is that, and you made mention it previously, that it built my self-esteem. It built who I wanted to become,
Mhm.
because I was a shy person who didn't talk much, very introverted, didn't care much about company and so forth. But when I became a recipient of persons who genuinely cared, it allowed me to come out of that little bubble. So we know that for a fact that mentorship, it comes with a lot of benefits. It's not just about telling people your business. It's not just about, talking to people who are talking to a person who you believe is well outstanding and who looks successful, but to garner that benefit from them, that will impact your life in the long run. And I'm sure that many other persons who would have impacted person's life, they go out to be some of the most impactful persons themselves, and they will always make reference back to the time of somebody in their lives. There was a grandmother, an uncle, or auntie, sister who would have even said something that would have resonated with them throughout their entire life. But I want you to give me at least two more benefits of mentorship, and how it can have that impact on a young person specifically.
All right, so we have looked at it builds self-esteem, it builds self-discovery, but it builds confidence.
Mm,
It builds it roots out fear. For example, I was mentoring a young man who was always like he had stage fright. So he would come up on stage and he would be sweating profusely. And what we did before, we let him do trial stints,
mm,
several of them, how to read well, how to articulate, how to speak, how to pronounce your words properly. And you see, after several of those one-to-one, when his strength was restored, when his confidence had risen to a certain height, he stood up before the people, and what we say, he just excelled. He just tore up. We say he just tore up. And what, as I said before, you have to be patient. If you cannot be a good mentor if you are impatient, because
mm,
what's going to happen is that you're going to kick over the proverbial bucket of milk that was just drawn from the udder of the cow. You're just going to kick it over, And there are some things like like a Humpty Dumpty. When he had a great fall, but all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together, because when you break and what breaks is liquid, you cannot do anything more about it. So that's why we say you have to be patient. But let me give you something. I read a book some years ago entitled Training a Tiger. It's written by the father of gentleman's name is Earl Woods, the father of arguably the greatest of all golfers. And what he tells us is that in teaching the art of golfing, which is just one of them, children learn by observation and imitation. So the mentee will learn by observation and imitation. Now, Tiger, he said, and that's his son Tiger, would sit on his high chair in the garage and watch me hit balls into the net. Before I knew it, Tiger was imitating my golf swing. And look what a golfer he has become. Arguably, I mean, he has had some challenges, but arguably, the world's greatest of all golfers. He has won all the Masters. He has all the green jackets to show, because somebody was so transparent that he allowed his son observe him and allow him to imitate him. Remember now, we are not producing Xerox copies of ourselves, because that would be a problem. I don't want my mentee to do everything the way I do it. I want my mentee to understand the principle and shape his own understanding of what I said and did, because ultimately it is going to be about what have you become, because you have been exposed to observation and imitation. Yeah,
And that's very important. And I just want to reiterate that it's mentors are not looking for clones of themselves.
there you
They
go.
they give a little piece of them so that we can improve on it. I'm sure, even though you made mention of Tiger Woods' father, who he probably had a good golfing skills, but he probably didn't get the title of the best golfer in the world. His son imitated
There
him,
you
and
go.
became the best version of what he saw in his father.
There you
It's
go.
like how you probably were inspired by a couple teachers in high school. You liked how they taught, and you like how they dressed. You like how some things about them, but you did not just settle for what they would have been or what they were. You improve on it. So that we improve on the things that we would have come to know and come to learn based on what we would have gotten from those who would have mentored us. And we jump into the last and the final question, and that is where we tie it off with the Bible. We know that many persons this is not exclusive from biblical concepts, because while we have earthly mentors, we know that they're flawed. You know, they told here and there, and even the Bible, we know that even the prophets and other religious people, they too have their own flaws. But to put it on a spiritual twist, looking at a few noble men and women in the Bible who were great mentors to what that comes to mind is Elijah and Elisha story. And it's a popular one. That's a very popular one, because here you had Elijah going. He would have been training Elisha, and when it came for him to be raptured, because God took him, you know, we see where everything that where Elijah left off, Elisha was supposed to even be a even greater prophet than where his master left off. So we
Yeah.
know for a fact that you have to improve yourself. You don't just stay where your mentors left off, but you have to continue to improve. We're going to talk about many other persons in
I,
the Bible who were like
I could
that.
I could add to that and to just let you know that when Elisha made a very fervent request, he said, "Give me a double portion of your spirit."
Yes, man.
And listen, you talk about Elijah, but Elisha was so outstanding. He understood, and look how Moses mentored Joshua, who became the leader of the children of Israel in Canaan. Look at how Eli mentored Samuel, and Samuel was one of the most notable prophets in the Bible. Samuel himself, because um, he had already anointed David as a young boy, and Samuel mentored David until he became the second king of Israel. Look at Barnabas. Barnabas mentored Paul, and Paul became what? The greatest New Testament scholar. Paul, in turn, mentored Timothy, and look what he was. And then the greatest mentor was Jesus. He mentored his disciples, and they turned the world right side up with the gospel.
And just to make mention that the when these men mentored those persons, they weren't saying, "Oh, if I mentor these persons, they're going to be better than I was." And a phrase that Jesus made mention of just jumped into my mind. I hope I'm not, what do you call it, ICGs or XG, or that but Jesus said that greater things than these you will do than I did.
Mhm.
I hope I'm speaking in the right context now.
Yes, he says, because I'm going to my Father and I'm going to send you the Comforter,
Yes,
the Paracletos,
yes.
the one to be by your side. Yes, he said that.
Yeah, greater
Mhm.
things. So it's obvious that
Mhm.
when God calls us and he equips us, he wants us not to just settle for the knowledge that we have. Just like when we were building a relationship with God, when we just started, we start drinking milk, and to us that was the greatest light we would have received. But as we grow and as we read, we become better than the day we were when we just learned. So it's obvious that even as we mentor persons and even as we are being mentored, whichever side we are on that spectrum, we should not see it as um allowing that person to become jealous when we see that the person is elevating more than where you were when you were mentoring them. But we should be happy that they're growing. We should be appreciative of where they are, not say, "Oh, me make that person reach where they are." No, we should
Yeah.
never see it as that. But as we ourselves are being mentored as well, we should be humble. We should be teachable. We should not behave as if we can't be impacted. We must have that humble and teachable spirit as well.
I want to share with you two things before we wrap things up because they are critical. In the context, in the environment of mentorship, there are two other things that I'd like to just leave with you and our viewers and listeners. May I go ahead?
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
All right. I said these are the four movements of mentoring. This is how we mentor. Number one, the mentor performs the task while the mentee watches. Number two, the mentor performs the task while the mentee helps. Number three, the mentee performs the task while the mentor helps. And here is the beauty. The fourth movement, the mentee performs the task while the mentor watches. That is taking mentorship to its pristine level. And I'm going to connect now what I just said to this. Excellent 21st century mentoring requires a level of vulnerability, risk taking, maturity, and openness. If you are not mature and open, you cannot become a true mentor. You see, we mentor to build the leaders, not just to offer some souped up disciplining ministry. This essentially says that the mentor will do everything in his or her power to equip another person or groups to properly carry out functions of one's professional or voluntary responsibility in such a way that the mentor can sit back and watch the mentee function, watch this now, without being jealous, without being
Mm.
covetous, or feeling threatened.
That's a very, those 4 points are very important. I'm going to write them down because they're very important. They're extremely important
Yes.
for a person who is thinking of even mentoring a person, to think about persons who are what when a person is being, mentored, they should see these characteristics in the person who is mentoring them. It shouldn't be about self, it shouldn't be about what you can get from the time invested, but it should truly have that positive regard, that positive genuine regard person who value. And just to close off, Doc, I want you to say, give us a final word on this matter and apply to, use a biblical principle to just nice it up.
All right. Let's look at Jesus. I think Jesus is the best example, biblical example for mentorship. And I call this classic example of unforgettable mentoring is the rearing of Jesus by Mary and Joseph, his earthly parents. The Bible says in Luke chapter 2, 40 and 52, my students will tell you that this is my favorite youth ministry text. In Luke 2, 40 and 52, it says, quote, and the child grew and waxed strong in the spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And here comes my clinching text, verse 52. And Jesus increased in wisdom. He was wise. And in stature, he was physically strong. In favor with God, he had a spiritual connection with God. And finally, favor with man. He was socially attuned. When we are mentoring people, we must make sure that we take them to the highest level, the pinnacle, if you will, of human achievement, of spiritual achievement. He increased Jesus, wisdom, wise, stature, physically strong, favorite God, spiritually strong, and man, socially. That's the four-partite, what we call the complete four-partite development of the mentee. When the mentor takes time out to develop these four aspects of the mentee's life.
Very powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cleghorn. And with that note, we have come to the end of our Let's Talk Youth program, where we dealt with mentorship and the youth. Our guest this evening was Dr. Newton Cleghorn. I just want to say thank you, Doc, for taking the time out to add value to us on this matter. Those who have watched and those who watch in the future, that you took something from this presentation that will add value to your personal life. And as you add value to your life, don't forget to share it with somebody who you know needs to be enlightened as well. With that said, do have yourself a wonderful rest of the evening. Until then, take care.
Thank you.